Hello everybody, my name is Elona Pojani. I'm a lecturer at the Department of Finance at the University of Tirana, Albania. This webinar topic is disasters, poverty and development.
I will discuss today disaster impacts, focusing mostly on the relationship between disasters and economic development. I will address both macro level and micro level behavior in case of disasters. Climate change impacts are also considered, including their relationship with disaster management strategies. Finally, the concept of resilience will be included, focused mainly on economic aspects of resilience. This webinar will provide easy-to-understand concepts and is aimed to be used either by students or professionals working or studying in the field of disaster risk management. Disasters impact the macroeconomic indicators in any country they occur, and no apparent relation have been observed between economic development and exposure to natural disasters. These pictures show different disaster events that have occurred in different countries, developed or developing ones. I want you to try and think about the consequences, either economic, infrastructural, or social, that you see in each of them. These pictures show the map of the world as we know it. World Mapper is a collection of world maps called cartograms, where territories are resized on each map according to the subject of interest. World Mapper have created different maps showing aspects of disaster events. Here you can see 4 of them, showing total number of storms, injuries from storms, people left homeless from storms, and storm economic damage. As you can easily notice, the first map does not look much distorted, while the others reflect exactly what we are going to discuss in the next part of this webinar. All published data demonstrate that while absolute economic losses might be concentrated in high-income countries, the human cost of disasters falls overwhelmingly on low and lower middle-income countries. This is due to many factors, including the infrastructure conditions, lower building standards, absent or poor incentives for mitigation, underdevelopment of insurance sector, and low government resources available to cope with disasters. This burden is expected to rise, especially under the conditions of a changing climate, which is increasing the frequency and severity of extreme weather events. Some figures on disaster impacts are shown in this slide. More than $7 trillion is accounted for the economic damage caused worldwide as a result of natural disasters from the beginning of the 19th century to 2015. About 60% of the damage comes from floods and storms. The study was introduced by the Karlsruhe Institute of Technology in April 2016. Meanwhile, in terms of human loss, according to the study, 8 million people have died throughout this time frame from disasters such as earthquakes, volcanoes, droughts, fires, etc. In absolute terms, over the last 20 years, the USA recorded the biggest losses, reflecting high asset values as well as frequent events. China, by comparison, suffered a significantly higher number of disasters than the USA, but lower total losses. Comparing continents, Asia, as the continent with the largest population and landmass, has the most disasters, fatalities, and people affected. In relation to the population, the death rate is the highest in Africa. Between 1950s and 1990s, the cost of natural disasters increased 15 times. In the period 1998-2017, disaster-hit countries also reported direct economic losses valued at $2.9 billion. Overall, reported losses from extreme weather events rose by 151% between these two 20-year periods. Obviously, climate change is contributing to rising disaster risk. Contemporary thinking on climate change management defines two distinct activities to deal with it: mitigation activities and adaptation activities. However, public policies for disaster risk management often do not comprise climate action. The reason for these two distinctive agendas include the fact that climate change policy deals exclusively with climate-related hazards and their impacts, the fact that timeframes for reactive adaptation to climate change and disasters are distinct. In fact, disaster impacts are relatively immediate and concentrated, whereas the consequences of climate change may evolve, along with social change over a longer time scale. And finally, disaster risk reduction has to date focused on the local and national scales, while climate change policy has so far prioritized mitigation, which has been global in its scope. Economic impacts of a disaster are usually grouped into three categories: direct, indirect, and macroeconomic effects, often called also secondary effects. Direct economic damages are mostly the immediate damages due to the event per se. A smaller portion of these losses results from the loss of already produced goods. The effects can be divided up into those to the private and public economic sectors. Indirect economic losses occur as a consequence of physical destruction affecting households and firms. The most important indirect economic impacts include diminished production or service due to the interruption of economic activity, increased prices, increased costs as a consequence of destroying roads, or loss or reduction of wages due to business interruption. It should be kept in mind that the social and environmental consequences also have economic repercussions. The public sector has in most of the cases the responsibility to bear the cost of damages caused by a disaster. Therefore, macroeconomic impacts also arise. The disasters will affect different sectors in varying degrees, and thus will be reflected in the macroeconomic performance and indicators of the country's economy. These include the GDP, agriculture, manufacture and service sector, exports and imports of goods, fixed capital, inflation rate, public financing, and trade balance. The GDP, which is the main macroeconomic indicator, logically will drop in the year of the event. The aftermath often is affected by the ability of the public sector to respond to the disaster event through its reconstruction policies. Sometimes the GDP level in the long run might overcome the GDP level before the disaster event following these strong public policies. We will now discuss the disaster events in a more focused way, concentrating on individual level. In general terms, perception of risk can be considered as an interpretation or understanding that the individual gives to particular threats that could potentially cause loss of life or property. Risk perception includes the process of collecting, selecting, and interpreting signals about uncertain impacts of events, activities, or technologies. These signals can be referred directly to observation or information from others. Floods have the largest number of studies conducted in relation to the attitude, perception, information, and preparation of individuals to the risk of natural disasters. Few studies have addressed the risk perceptions in case of earthquakes and other types of natural disasters. Factors contributing to the attitude and perception of the risk of natural disasters have been grouped by some authors into four categories: risk factors, information factors, personal factors, and context factors. Risk factors are related to individuals' experience and are influenced by the way the likelihood and frequency of an event is perceived, based on individuals' own encounters with past events. Informational factors include the issue of risk communication and its impact. Information flow from experts, public authorities, and media contribute to the perception people have on the efficiency of disaster risk management strategies, and consequently to the perception of the level of safety from a disaster event. Personal factors include the relationship between risk perception and factors such as age, gender, education level, profession, stakeholders, membership, personal knowledge, religiousness, etc. And finally, context factors such as economic factors, vulnerability indices, home ownership, family status, country and area of living, closeness to the waterfront, size of community, age of the youngest child, also affect the way risk is perceived by the population. Any population exposed to natural dangers wish and should be optimally informed about the risk characteristics, preventive measures, and appropriate behaviors during emergencies. Authorities should devise appropriate planning, prepare coping strategies, and effectively communicate information to residents, people in the workplace, and communities as a whole. Better response to natural disasters requires active involvement of residents, which should have been informed and taught about the dangers they are facing. In other cases, public discussion, stakeholder participation, and perhaps joint resolution of conflicts are needed. All this situation includes social processes that are commonly included in the term risk communication. Risk communication is perceived as a necessary link between perception of risk and its management. Communication programs should be based on a sound understanding of individuals' sociopsychology. Concluding this webinar, now we'll focus on the concept of resilience. Public sector resilience towards hazards is determined by the efficiency and effectiveness of disaster management policies, the direct, indirect, and secondary costs caused by the disasters, the individual's behavior and awareness level on disaster risk, and finally the economic resilience level. Staying on the last concept, the ability of the public sector to respond to disaster event is often referred to as economic resilience. The economic resilience is conditioned by all possible internal and external resources available to the government to respond to the event. Such resources are shown in this picture. Access to these resources has limitations and costs that must be taken into account depending on the macroeconomic and financial conditions of the country. We will now briefly address financial strategies for disaster risk management. Financial strategies for disaster risk management are intended to ensure that individuals, businesses, and government have the resources necessary to manage the adverse financial and economic consequences of disasters. The analysis of financial exposure of a country to disaster is an important part of the disaster risk management strategy. Financial protection will help governments mobilize resources in the immediate aftermath of a disaster, while buffering the long-term fiscal impact of the disaster. Financial strategy is only one component of a comprehensive disaster risk management strategy, while other components include risk identification and modeling, mitigation policies, preparedness and response system management, and post-disaster reconstruction strategies and plans. The main risk management instruments are illustrated in this table. These are categorized according to their approaches and have been divided into non-market risk transfer, market risk transfer, and intertemporal risk transfer. More detailed presentation covering each of these instruments are at the focus of other webinars of this series. Concluding this short presentation, I want to emphasize one more time how it is very important to understand the relationship between disasters and development in different perspectives, both at government and individual level. The development of disaster risk management strategies should involve a thorough process connecting government, business sector, and households, and including risk communication as an essential part of the process. Thank you very much for your attention.